20 years after Brooklyn, the novel, nothing happens except that she goes to the suburbs, she has two babies, and she's reasonably happy. For me, that's never enough for a novel. I actually need drama. I need something. So therefore, that part of the aftermath of Brooklyn doesn't exist as a novel. I think the reader has no trouble imagining it. So therefore, there's no reason for me to describe it. But what I got was strange. It was sudden, and it was an image rather than saying an idea that I need to write about what happened to her. And a single thing that she opens her door and a man is there, and he has really something quite melodramatic. I mean, quite sort of that in an ordinary novel, you wouldn't normally have a man telling my baby, the baby, I'll be the baby up here. And, it's if you're going to do that, you then have to stop worrying about, is this a sequel? And start worrying about how do you construct a novel from that beginning? And the answer is you construct a novel in a very particular way by working with what's disappeared more or less from most novels is really a plot. And there's not even a good Spanish word for plot. And but that plot in English, the plot of a novel, the plot. Does your novel have a plot? And someone like Javier Marias in Madrid, he could do it, but usually with a murder. In Corazón Tan Blanco, Javier Marias will have a murder and then work in a very serious, psychological, dramatic way. But I didn't want a murder. I mean, I just don't do murder. No interest in murder. So therefore, I was working with the same idea that you now, from this opening, need to have the consequences of that opening for the rest of the book. But the rest of the book will not be scene, but will be one scene and a string of consequences. And so I was working so technically in a way, so just trying to get this right, because in a novel like that, you cannot have extra material. It has to be directed. And therefore, when it was over, it was only when the book came out, I had to start worrying, is this a sequel? What is a sequel? Why do I hate sequels? Why is the word sequel offensive? And it is offensive because the novel, as the 19th century developed, became a circle rather than a line. So something like the 18th century or even earlier, Don Quixote or the Tristram Shandy, move along in a picaresque way, playing with time, but not actually containing time, not arc or not circle. But as the 19th century began, then we began to more and more use this sort of closed form. And once you break that, having established it, you then break it. Well, that's horrible, and you should be ashamed. I think that it does belong to every immigrant, but maybe only as dream. In other words, if you're Ethiopian and you're in Madrid or you're in Asturias and you're looking for work and you're looking for somewhere to live, every so often it comes into your mind, there was a summer 10 years ago in Addis Ababa when I was with a girl for maybe one night, or maybe 5 minutes, or maybe just a friend, but I still think maybe that was right for me. And if I went back, I would want to see that person again. So it's just that idea of that immigration involves levels of dreaming that maybe doesn't. But also, I think it happens that if somebody comes from Asturias to Madrid and is going back for the festa, for the big August festival, and is looking at the crowds, people they're in school with, it's often just one person, and you look over and say, "Fuck, is she married yet?" So you're always idea that there was one summer when you were 19, and if you don't want the summer back, but you want one night back, and it's one person. And then if you're emotionally in any way raw, you think, I wonder if I went back this way, would she be? So I'm talking about that idea of home, what home means, And the fact that then what I can do, see, what I can't do is have the whole novel being about the baby and the man and the husband, because I've done that in the opening scene. You know that now. That's done. The thing now is that I have to do it calls her to do something. And of course, the excuse of her mother and going back to Ireland. And so it's, the homecoming. But you see, if it's just a homecoming, if it opens with her at the airport, you then don't have the intensity that underneath her journey home is this other drama bubbling. So I'm sort of playing with ways of upping the drama and trying to keep the cliche down. When you're 20 and you go home to your parents' house, your mother's house, and you get into your old bed, and and you want to say in the morning, that mattress is very old. Or you feel in the night a sound that reminds you so much of school, childhood, winter, just a sound. And so you think, am I in my old bedroom? Why? Why don't I just go now? And then, so what does home mean? What does going back mean? So you've got all that questions that I think everybody knows. But of course, she has been, in America for 20-something years, and she comes home. Her mother, it isn't as though it's the big hug and it's beautiful kiss and lovely to see you. Her mother doesn't know what emotion she's feeling. And so it becomes very ugly for a while. And then her mother changes, but it's not, the process of growing up is not stable. The process of going away very far destabilizes the personality in some really fundamental way that is really good for a novel. It's probably bad for everything else. It's slow and it's organic. So in other words, if you take notes, you lose it. You let it wander in your mind. And sometimes you don't even know you're doing it. And it's very nice because when you're lying in bed, you think, I should get up. You think, no, it's fine because I'm thinking of my novel, which often you're not. So it gives laziness a good name. Because the longer you leave it, sometimes the better you can get, the more detail. But this time around, after Brooklyn, what I needed was, I needed her to become more articulate, but not become angry or powerful or in some way content, but more that every time she speaks, there's a control. There's an eloquence almost. There's a forensic way of approaching tone. She's not shy when she speaks, but she's shy before she speaks and after she speaks. I was trying to get that idea across of someone is almost a feminist, is moving parallel to the feminist movement in a suburb. It doesn't matter. And she's not reading Betty Friedan. She's not reading Germaine Greer. She's not reading Simone de Beauvoir. She's simply experiencing. And it's coming out in this strange way that when she speaks, there is a sense of control. And so I was working with that not as an idea, but more as a response to each moment. That in the book, first of all, she's very shy with the Irishman who comes to the door. But then when she has to confront her, especially her mother-in-law and her brother-in-law, those two, they're two big scenes. And I really worked. The work was more cutting than thinking. In other words, I would write it as though in real time, this was what had occurred in fact. And then I would write it in longhand, type it, look at it, and then start cutting it down so there wasn't too much. But it was done without, I didn't think about it. I suppose I put enough thought into it and then wrote it, but the writing was the thing that mattered, not the preparation for the writing. And sometimes I did it too much. And so it was a constant business of judging. You read it in the morning, you read it at night. In the morning, you're much more suspicious. In the night, you think you're great. And so it goes on. But you need to do that over months, to go back over it, especially those two scenes. Make sure, I don't want her to sound like a lawyer, so you got to be careful with that as well. So all of that. It's not there in childhood because there was no gallery, there was nothing. There was no art teacher, there was no art subject. So, I mean, the Barcelona experience was interesting because I suddenly became fascinated by a number of paintings and painters. And I talk in the book about figures that are really not known, from the 19th century, contemporaries of Picasso who stayed in Barcelona, including Isidro Nonell, Joaquim Mir, figures like that. But it's mainly that I suppose in my late teens, I would have been in the National Gallery in Dublin, but not in any serious way. So slowly, in my 20s, I got to know a number of people who were painters. And the reason I knew them was to do with, it was social. It was fun being around. They were just natural people to see and be with. More fun than being with people who become teachers or people who became, they were always available in a way. They were good drinkers and there was good conversation and it was messy. They were always going somewhere. And so that began. And then I became interested in a few particular paintings and painters, Irish figures. And then slowly, initially, I would really spend my days in the gallery. And it's very hard, it takes you a long time to work out if you're looking at something because you should look at it, or if you're looking at something because you really, really need to look at it. And it's a big difference between them. So you suddenly realize there's some painting by Fra Angelico that's really and there's another painting by Raphael. I'm just looking at that because someone told me I should. And so you slowly develop, I suppose it's called taste. But for me, it was a very slow, gradual process. And it began with pure ignorance, pure not knowing, pure, and then it just built slowly. I've just read an extraordinary book, which is called A Cool Queer Life. Tom Gunn. That's ThomGunn. Tom Gunn. Now, Tom Gunn was an English poet. Let me see, born in 1928, maybe, died in 2004. I don't know if his name is coming up there, but he went to California when he was in his 20s. He lived in San Francisco all his life. He was gay. He wore leather. He loved motorbikes. And he wrote poems in a 16th century style. And then he opened his style to a 20th century style, and he wrote poems like Whitman, and he wrote open poems. He wrote a famous group of poems, elegies, laments, for friends of his who died of AIDS. At one point in this book, he can list 37 friends in San Francisco who have recently died of AIDS. And he's talking about, say, 1987, 37 friends, you can imagine. And this book is a big biography. It's like this size, it's 700 pages. And it tells the story of his life. And it's a whole new way of looking in a way that, he had a lover very early in his 20s. They stayed together all their lives, but they got other lovers. His boyfriend wanted monogamy. Tom Gunn wanted to have as much sex as possible. A lot of drugs in this book. But it's a big biography of a major English poet. But it's telling the story of his life, as a leather queen, as a serious teacher, as a drug addict, as everything possible. And it's a marvelous book. It's by Michael Knott, and it's just been published in English. And I promise you, it will give you a great summer. There are two books by Juan Goytisolo. One is called Coto Vedado, and the other is called, in English, it's called The Blind Rider. It's a short novel written towards the end of his life. The title in Spanish is different, but in English it's called The Blind Rider. And just that I love his uncompromising imagination, the style, sort of odd vulnerability, and fearlessness. So yeah, I would try and read both of those books every summer again. So in August, I'll be found reading Goytisolo. And the other one is Jane Austen, especially the novel Persuasion and Pride and Prejudice, Mansfield Park. Those three books maybe by Jane Austen. And I've learned a lot from Jane.